Hey, you want some cheese?
What the hell is that?
It's a mouse.
You found him outside? You brought him home?
Nope. Stay there, lad.
So, where did you get it?
He was already here in the house.
What?
Sorry, sir. In my defense, your house smells like cheese. So I came for the feast.
Feast? Cheese?
It is a new house, and it smells like cheese.
It's not old, and it doesn't smell like cheese.
Hey man, what's up, bro? Hello. Oh my goodness.
Oh, you brought company, of course.
Hey, aren't they cute?
Hey guys, are you sick?
Are they sick or something?
Oh yes, and I'm nurturing them back to health.
Yeah, you better. I'll help you later. Hey, not nibble on that, that's my work.
Oh, good gracious,
Hey
my
man,
apologies.
peace, right? Oh dear, I'm so sorry.
Okay, I have work to do, so go play with them somewhere else, please.
Oh, alright.
Hello friends, my name is Ari Thurger, and today I'm going to tell you if the Eddas are reliable. Of course, I'm talking about the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. And a lot of people, including me, still use these sources for their Scandinavian studies. But is the content really reliable? I cannot answer this question with a simple yes or no, but I can save a little bit of your time if your question is, should I read them? And yes, you definitely should, because these are still two of the best sources to understand Norse mythology. But let's get to it. Are the Eddas reliable? First of all, what does Edda mean? Opinions differ greatly, as to be expected, but the most usual meaning is that the word is related to odre, poem, poetry, translated as poetics. Our knowledge of the pagan deities comes from several sources, and most prominent among them are the two Icelandic works, the Poetic Edda, a collection of songs relating the deeds of Nordic gods and heroes, and the Prose Edda, a work composed by Snorri Sturluson. These are two essential works to have an understanding of the pagan Germanic religion. But let's start with the Prose Edda first, which seems much more complex to talk about. The Uppsala Codex is one of the three most important manuscripts composed by Snorri Sturluson. The first part is about the Aesir and Hymir, then comes the Skaldskaparmál, poetic diction, and last the Autatal, account of meters, a composition about King Haakon and Duke Skuli. Snorri Sturluson writes his Prose Edda during the 13th century. He made good use of the Poetic Edda, but also other accounts, some lost forever obviously, but others which have survived through oral tradition. It gives us a synthesized and simplified version of the Norse mythology. This work of his comes in contradiction with other sources, and also quite possibly his work was influenced by Christianity, which already was the official religion in Iceland for 200 years, already in Snorri Sturluson's time. It's also very likely that the sources Snorri used to compose this mythology comes solely from the region of Trondheim in Norway, such sources composed by the end of the 10th century. The very myth of creation transmitted to us by Snorri, which he refers to it as in the beginning there was only a great void and two worlds were created, one of ice and another of fire, might give us the indication that this might be a very Icelandic perspective of the creation of the world, adding familiar elements to the story, the landscape of Iceland, glaciers and volcano activity, combined to create a land. This brought to my attention that mythology is clearly different from place to place, obviously, not only because of historical, cultural and traditional factors, but also because of geographical factors. To the Scandinavian communities further south, where the landscape is clearly different of that of the north, such communities wouldn't have the same perspectives on the creation of the cosmos. Another aspect is that the great majority of the sources were composed by poets, financially sponsored by political and military authorities, and also poems to spread amongst warriors, which means poems to be read and listened by certain groups where certain deities were more popular than others, which helps to explain why in archaeology we find that Freyr was much more relevant in ancient Scandinavian societies, and why in Denmark, for instance, there are more place names related to this deity, Freyr, and also Tyr. But then in the sources, particularly in the Prose Edda, Odin seems to be the most important deity, almost to the point of being the major deity, because in the Prose Edda, Odin is seen as a god not only related to war but also poetry, and here we can see the connection between poets and the military and political leaders. Being the major deity, or seeming to be the major deity, might be one of the aspects that shows us the influence of Christianity. The Catholic age in Iceland between the year 1000 and 1550 changed pagan behaviors a lot. Public sacrifices to the Germanic gods and the traditional faith was kept in private, in hiding. The conversion was obviously a prolonged, gradual transition, but from generation to generation, the new faith and the culture along with it began to take hold. Icelandic scholars traveled abroad to learn the new faith, and schools were established in Iceland itself. And 100 years after this slow process of conversion, the Icelandic language was first used to write down histories, sagas, and poetry. During Snorri Sturluson's time in the 13th century was a time of Danish dominion in Iceland and the sort of golden age of Icelandic culture and literature. Poems of the Poetic Edda were committed to parchment during this time also, and Icelanders already lived really comfortable with their national Catholicism. Snorri Sturluson was a man of power, very active as a politician, and Christianity was also very active in the Icelandic political network, so you can't expect Snorri Sturluson to write something completely pagan and get away with it during this time. There was the great risk of losing its position in the Icelandic society, so if you read the Prose Edda, you can see a lot of Christian influence. You will see the Icelandic political and social realities printed in this work. So we need to read it and go beyond the metaphors, try to separate what is Christian and what is pagan, so we can understand the religious background of the Norse societies. And of course, we need to already have a certain knowledge of the pre-Christian Germanic religion in order to understand it better. Now, in terms of the Poetic Edda, the majority of the information in there comes from Western Scandinavian sources, Norway and Iceland, with a Germanic influence, of course, in some of its compositions, and even Irish in some of the poems. But what we have in our hands nowadays is the written version made in Iceland, therefore culturally shaped by Western Scandinavia. The material of the Poetic Edda was written during the 13th century, but its contents can be dated between the years 800 and 1200, the Viking period in Scandinavia. Some of the elements come from a much earlier age, obviously, through oral tradition, but the form in which they were preserved is definitely medieval. The skalds who composed these poems may have been pagans, but they were aware of Christianity and Islam, which may or may not have influenced them in creating such tales. Furthermore, the religious understanding of the Central European Germanic peoples who fought the Romans is very different from the medieval far-traveling Vikings. So it's a great mistake to think the Vikings subscribed to the exact same mythology as the Central European Germans 1,000 years before. Religion in prehistoric Europe was not a static, unchanging tradition, but a wild field of creative innovations, and that sort of thinking lasted till the Middle Ages. So, in conclusion, the Eddas reflect late Icelandic beliefs rather than a pan-Germanic mythology, but they are still great sources to understand Norse mythology. if your mind is open to the fact that what is written there isn't purely pagan, and you have to accept that a Germanic religion doesn't exist as a whole, a unified religious belief. It is a beautiful variety of pre-Christian beliefs mixed together to give us a better understanding of the world. Alright friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I thought it would be useful to make a video about the Eddas, because they are still great sources to understand Norse mythology and a certain religious background of Scandinavian societies. But we have to take in mind that what is written in there, it's not 100% reliable, because there is a variety of influences in there, even though certain accounts are the glimpse of a pre-Christian religion, pre-Christian beliefs which have survived through oral tradition. But we have to be aware of archaeological evidences and historical records and compare them with what is written in the Eddas, so we might understand better the pre-Christian beliefs, the pagan beliefs, as much as possible. Alright friends, thank you so much for watching, and all the links to my social media are down below at the description. See you on the next video, and tack för idag!